everyone. This is Jennifer, and I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about immigration and how President Trump's immigration policy has affected our foster care system and how it's affected our children in our immigration communities. So, just give me a minute to get set up because I'm going to be reading this off of the PowerPoint or talking about it from the PowerPoint that I've created. It is also attached in the discussion box. The attachment is so you can look at it there. The title of it was called Trump's Immigration Policy Pushing Children into Foster Care. I got the article from youthtoday.org. I think immigration is such a hot topic that there's so many angles of it that we're not talking about that's important to discuss. And one thing that I never gave much thought to until the article was how it affects our children, specifically our children in the immigration communities that their parents are here illegally, and what happens to these children who are born in the United States when their parents are deported. So, a summary of the article is how President Trump's immigration policy allows the deportation of all illegal immigrants. So, prior in President Obama's administration, there were only immigrants who had criminal backgrounds or were participating in illegal activity. Those were at the top of the hierarchy in terms of who gets deported. And under President Trump's administration, all those sanctions or safety nets were completely taken away. So pretty much anybody who is here illegally is up for deportation. Also, due to the high frequency of deportations that's happening now among the immigrant population, many children who were born in the United States whose parents were immigrants are being sent into foster care. And the problem with this is a lot of foster care agencies aren't required to number by number document the amount of children they get, especially children who come from immigrant families. So there's an estimated number, I cannot remember the number exactly, but when I was reading it and the number that was given, I think it was like around 5,000 or maybe it was 55,000. I know it's a big discrepancy, and I don't have it pulled up, and I don't want to waste your guys' time. But if you're interested, I'll also copy and paste a link to the article so it's easier for you to access. But regardless of that, the numbers, I just didn't really believe them because if they're not required to document these children, how are these numbers accurate? And and there's probably more that they're not even considered, like they fall through the cracks. Like that's just a problem in our field, is that a lot of people fall through the cracks, and these are children, innocent children that are being ripped from their families and put into foster care, which does not have the best reputation of taking care of children. So I feel like they're further being traumatized from fleeing from a country, seeking asylum and safety in the United States, just to be ripped from their parents and sent into foster care. The cycle of trauma just seems to be repeating itself. But anyway, the main point of this is that the new immigration policies are putting a burden on the foster care system, which is obviously maxed out as it is. There's just not enough resources to go around. And now, thanks to this new immigration policy, a lot of foster care homes and a lot of resources, they just are limited and they don't know what to do with these kids. So, but President Trump, however, does not see a problem with this. He believes his immigration policies are working because arrest levels at the Mexican border are the lowest they've ever been. And also, he believes this is a deterrent for other immigrants because he thinks that this will prevent further burden on our social welfare system, which we've studied in this class. The percentage of people using the social welfare system is pretty low in comparison to what we think in terms of our population compared with who is on social welfare. So I just don't feel that that is a valid argument because we have the resources. They're just not being put where they need to be. So next, we're going to talk about how this immigration policy and foster care, or how immigration policy affects foster care, child welfare, and human rights. So this is a multifaceted issue. It's not just about foster care. It's about these children who have rights and how they're being violated. So President Trump's immigration policy puts into question the humanity of our government. Regardless of their immigrants or not, these are human beings. And as social workers, we uphold the NASW values. And as social workers, makes us question, is our government behaving in a humanitarian way? So some issues with the immigration policy in regards to children and families' well-being is that many legal children are being taken away from loving families and placed into foster care due to their parents' citizenship status. So there are a lot of children who are taken away from their families for very good reasons, such as abuse, drug abuse, neglect. They deserve better. And I don't think that it's necessarily humanitarian to rip a child away from a loving family who's trying to do the best they can, and place them in a system that is known for not upholding the child's best interest. And also, it's important to consider the psychological and social development of these children, and how it's negatively impacted by this immigration policy. You know, a lot of these children are at a critical age where their development is taking off, and so many things can negatively or positively affect them. And, you know, that's something to be mindful about. And like I mentioned earlier, there is the risk of further traumatization of the children and families that have sought refuge in the United States, or who are trying to have a better life, who come from, you know, third world countries or countries at war. You know, that's something to be mindful about too. And then also we need to think like in terms of the law, is that parents have a constitutional right to be with their children. Some people say that in the article it discusses, well, if they're not citizens, do they have these same rights as people who are here or who are citizens? And regardless, there are other lawyers in the article that agree that these parents do have a constitutional right and they are protected to keep their children with them. So, you know, there's a lot of negative things that affect children in terms of President Trump's immigration policy and foster care. And, you know, it's a cycle that repeats itself. So some strengths and weaknesses of the immigration policy. Some weaknesses are that it separates families. It's costly to the economy to remove workers who are doing well. It further endangers refugees from seeking safety. Increased spending for Homeland Security, because Trump has increased the amount of ICE workers in certain areas. And it burdens other countries' immigration resources, such as Canada, for example. There's been an article that came out and said that Canada is reaching its capacity to take refugees. So really, in terms of the bigger picture as a world, are we pulling our part to help other human beings? Some strengths of President Trump's immigration policy is it's a deterrent for terrorists, drug dealers, violent criminals, things of that nature. And it increases American safety to some regard. Well, I guess that's the main point of it, I guess. But after reading these policy changes, it doesn't seem that way. So, sorry, my presentation is not working. Okay, so some of the recommendations for the policy change happened when President Trump came into office. The new immigration policies no longer had exemptions, as I mentioned earlier, under Barack Obama, President Obama. Um, he only sought violent immigrants or immigrants who were doing illegal activity. Not really. He didn't really. A lot of his policies protected immigrants that were doing well in the United States, that were prospering, that were, their children were thriving. A lot of his policies did protect those immigrants. But now, Trump has done away with all that, so all illegal immigrants are fair game. And then also, Trump administration does not require a judge to rule on cases of deportation. So prior, you would need a judge to deport someone. Now, an ICE agent can just pick someone up and they may be sent back, is how quickly it could happen. And another thing too to mention in regards to foster care children is a lot of immigrant families will pay smugglers to send their children to the border to seek asylum, safety, a better opportunity. A lot of this comes from countries at war, third world countries, things like that. Prior, these children were protected under the Obama administration. They were given asylum. Now Trump has implemented that the new policy will hold their parents and the children both responsible, and they may face criminal charges together. So there is no safety net for children. And also a big part that you've probably seen in the news is there's a lot of sanctuary cities that, like you've seen California, for instance, have alerted immigrant communities in the past when there's going to be an ICE raid. Now, Trump is trying to figure out some form of punishment for these cities. So, those are some recommendations for the immigration policy change. And how can social workers help? There are so many things that we as social workers can do. Social workers on the micro, meso, and macro levels can work with multiple arenas in shaping policies regarding immigration that are humanitarian. Obviously, there has to be some type of immigration policy, but it needs to be done in a humanitarian way that is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. So there's a lot we can do. We can work with nonprofits. We can work with a lot of agencies, such as there's Legal Aid, who, we need to get their names out in the immigrant community, that there is legal help for them, and that there's resources, and that there's people who want to help them and want them to succeed and thrive. And, as social workers, I think it's our duty to do those things. Also, social workers can get involved in local charities and nonprofits that help aid immigrant communities, whether it's financially, through legal resources, education, learning English. I mean, there's just so many different outlets that social workers can work with the immigrant community and work with other outlets to improve the situation. But one thing to be aware of that I didn't really think about is that as social workers, a lot of our jobs are funded through the state, local governments, even federal government. If you're working, for example, with the VA or things like that, that you have to be aware of your dual relationships. So, for example, if I was working a federal job and, it would probably not be in the best interest to get involved with a situation like this because of our current administration. I think that's something that we as social workers have to assess and weigh the consequences. Sometimes, the positive outweigh the negative. So that's something a social worker has to be mindful about, is putting themselves in a situation that, may not pan out very well. But anyway, that's my presentation on how President Trump administration's immigration policy affects foster care and children in the immigrant community. Thanks. And also, I have posted the link to my article so you can click it and read it. And then also, I will also post the slideshow as well so you can see all my notes because I know I kind of rambled off. But anyway, thanks for watching.